This is Talking Data Equity, and I'm Heather Kraus. I am the founder of an organization called We All Count, and We All Count is a project for equity in all data projects. So we're about building tools and processes and strategies that help you not just talk about embedding equity in your work, but actually do it in a concrete, practical way. And on Fridays, we do something called Talking Data Equity, which is a free, informal gathering of anybody who's actually practicing this in their own work. And we're learning together. And sometimes on Fridays, we have special guests. And today we have one of the special guests that people have been requesting for so long and people are so excited about. Let me introduce you briefly to Kristin Powell. Kristin is the Deputy Director of an awesome organization that I've been talking to you all about for a long time called the Black Futures Lab. And one of the things that they're working on is the Black Census Project. And so we are so privileged to have Kristin join us today. And with all my technical issues, I'm going to turn it pretty much immediately over to Kristin, who will talk a little bit about themselves and the project. And while Kristin shares, we do ask you to stay muted. And then after a little while, we're going to open it up to live Q&A. And at that time, if you want to unmute yourself and ask a question, that's when you'll want to raise your hand, and we'll do our best to unmute you in the order that you raised your hands. At any point while Kristin's sharing or during the live Q&A, you can also, of course, put your questions and your comments into the chat. Feel free to use the chat at any point. And because we're trying to be mindful of people's online presence, you can use the chat with the drop-down menu set to everyone, which means everybody who's here will be able to see your comment or your question. Or if you want to ask a question privately, you can direct message it to me, and I'll do my best to curate it and ask the questions out loud without sharing your name. So having said that, thank you so much for your patience with our technical difficulties, and I'll turn it over to Kristin.
Hello, everyone. It's so great to be here. I really appreciate you welcoming me into the space. To give one disclaimer, I have a 2-year-old son. School's not in today for teacher planning day. He is right now laughing at the cartoons in the next room. He could come over here and try to jump on the computer. So we'll see how it goes. And he'll be welcome, but also we hope that he stays over in the computer because it's a little hard to stay focused. So my name is Kristin Powell, and a little bit about me. I have been in organizing for about 15 years and actually started my road to organizing in Jacksonville, Florida. I was a faith-based community organizer in Jacksonville for 10 years, and I've spent most of my time sitting in living rooms of thousands of people across North Florida, hearing their stories, how they're experiencing the world, and specifically their local government. And one thing that I learned in that experience is that public officials will say, because they have a relationship with 1 or 2 Black pastors, or they have a few Black people on their staff, they'll say, I know what Black people want in this community. And they haven't taken a second to listen to a Black person that actually lives in that community. And there's a huge disconnect between what people in power say is needed and what the community wants for themselves. And so I transitioned out of faith-based organizing a few years ago and have joined Black Futures Lab because for me in this stage of my career, it's really important for me to focus on Black liberation. One thing that I'm particularly concerned about as someone who is a daughter of a man who was trapped in the criminal justice system is that Black people and our rights are stomped on at every step of the road in this country, and we need Black political power. And so Black Futures Lab, that is what we do. We build Black political power. I've been with the organization for over a year now. And we do that in a few different ways. One, we invest financially in Black-led groups across the country that are doing social justice through grants and training and other support. We, like many other organizations, engage in get out the vote work. The third thing that I think makes us different is that we are specifically focused on collecting data on Black people and being the at the forefront of knowing what Black people want for their communities and being able to analyze that data and share it, not just with public officials, but with other groups, Black groups and groups that are serving Black populations, sharing that data. And so I'm really grateful that you guys wanted to hear from me on the Black Census Project. So let me pull up my PowerPoint. Let's see if all things work in my favor. Okay. Did the whole slideshow take up the screen now? Okay, good. So what is the Black Census Project? So for us, it's really important to think about this project as a way, a tool to build Black political power. We cannot be powerful in politics. And when we say being powerful, being able to decide who represents us and what agenda they put forward on our behalf. So we can't be powerful if we're not unified around what we want. And so we did this back in 2018. And at the time, we were the largest survey of Black people in 157 years. We surveyed 30,000 people in 2018. We did that through lots of different online platforms, Facebook and email blasts and other social media, but we also had partnerships with 28 Black-led organizations who were door knocking and canvassing in local communities, talking to people where they were. There's one thing that we find on Black data and specifics is that the people that are filling out these types of surveys are already politically engaged. And it's really important to us that we are meeting people where they are and specifically talking to folks who aren't typically engaged in the political process, which I'll talk about more. But we also translated into 9 languages. Last time, Spanish and Haitian Creole were kind of the most popular ones that were taken last time. We did get respondents of all 50 states. We re-granted over $1 million to Black-led organizations to help us canvass and talk to people, and we trained over 100 Black organizers. But this time, we want to listen to 200,000 Black people, and we are well on our way. We are wanting to do this by November 30th, and we've been collecting data since February. And we are partnering with over 100 Black organizations. This year, we've not just been able to talk to organizations that are like local grassroots, but also we've had the ability to engage with larger national partners like the NAACP, NAN, groups like that have a larger audience to get the word out about the census. And so our census doesn't just stop with collecting data. For our purposes, one of the major things that we want to do with this data is create a Black agenda that Black organizations can organize around. An agenda that is rooted in policy recommendations that Black people are united on. Like I said, from my own personal story, I have, sat in meetings with public officials and they will say things like, well, Black people don't care about climate change. And yet I'm sitting in living rooms with people in Jacksonville who are telling me about the rising sea levels that are flooding their backyards and how, because they are so low, and I just think about this now as the last hurricane just came into Florida, that Jacksonville, like many other cities, even though we don't always get hit head on by the hurricane, Jacksonville's on the ocean and is surrounded and has a ginormous St. Johns River lake or river that spirals through the whole city. So regardless of when we get hit by a hurricane, or if it's Miami or if it's Tampa, we flood because that river floods from Miami up, right? And surprise, surprise, Black people in Jacksonville are on that river, most in the places where there is no, I'm forgetting the word, not levees in Jacksonville, but where there is no protection, right? All the wealthier sides of town have protection from the river, but the Black neighborhoods do not, right? And so the Black agenda, we did this in 2020. You can go to our sister organization, our C4, Black to the Future Action Fund, and check out the 2020 Black agenda. There were 6 pillars that came out of the 2020 Black agenda. I always forget one, but climate change, fighting white supremacy, reforming the criminal justice system, healthcare reform, voter suppression, and the 6th one that never comes to me, wages. And so those were the 6 major things that came out of the first census. We believe that similar things will come out of this one, although we think that the economy will be a much bigger discussion in this one than it was 4 years ago. And so we do intend in 2023 to develop a similar Black agenda that has some policy recommendations based on what Black people said in this survey. And so our values around collecting data is that good data on Black people in our lives should be as accessible as possible. So we don't want it to just be sitting on a shelf collecting dust. It was amazing to me when I was organizing how many times I would get a community together, we would talk about what we wanted to work on, and they'd go, I don't know what solutions there are. And we would go to some expert in Jacksonville, and lo and behold, on their shelf, collecting dust was some beautiful solution to the problem we had, but the public officials didn't want to do it, right? There was no power to get that beautiful solution implemented. And so when we are sharing data and it's accessible on Black people, that gives us power to be able to organize around that data and win something. Also, collecting good data costs money, and money should not be a barrier. We want to make sure that as we are partnering, and we've partnered with over 50 of our organizations, our grassroots, small Black-led organizations that would normally not have access to the amount of data that we are collecting. And we want to be able to give that to them because they will be able to use it to organize locally. Working together on this project, could be transactional. We don't want it to be. We want it to be transformational for our partners. We want our partners to be able to not just help us canvas, but get data that is going to help them win things and get financial support that they don't typically get. We see ourselves as, a pathway to bringing in large funders to Black-led movements that aren't always seen by the big money power in foundation world. And then finally, sharing contact information should be opt-in, not automatic. So at the end of the survey, people are invited to share their contact information if they'd like to stay in touch with Black Futures Lab or the local organization that collected their data through canvassing, but they don't have to. And so if they do, they'll be able to get emails from us to learn more about our work. But we don't want that to be a barrier, especially because of the skepticism in Black communities about collecting their data. So for this survey, who we want to reach, when we looked at the last time we did this, we kind of were a little bit of a, how the church does things. Y'all come, and then everyone just comes who wants to come. But when you ask people to volunteer, it's always the people that volunteer for everything that fill it out. And so we noticed that we were heavy in Black women filling it out last time, surprise, surprise. And we were heavy in people who were already pretty politically engaged. And so we knew that this time we wanted to make sure that we were targeting populations who don't normally get listened to and are left out of the political process. So we prioritize partnerships with organizations that are working in rural areas. It always, me and Alicia Garza, our founder, talk about this a lot. When we hear political pundits say rural America and their vote, they're always talking about white people. Like, Black folks don't live in rural areas. In the South, we are heavy in rural areas. We are, currently canvassing in North Carolina and Georgia, and we're everywhere. And Black farmers, another thing they'll say is, the farmers, as if the farmers are only white. And so we do want to always engage in rural populations who get left out. Formerly and currently incarcerated people. So we are canvassing in prisons and jails this time and talking to people who are currently in facilities, but also people that have recently come out, especially because we have a huge focus on trying to engage Black men. And unfortunately, we all know the data. There are large proportion, prisons and jails are disproportionately filled with Black men. Immigrant populations. There's a lot of racial dynamics in the immigrant community related to being Black, and Blackness in many cases is very much an American thing, right? And a lot of people who might look Black or have a Black experience may not identify themselves immediately as a Black person, but they share that ancestry. And so we are all trying to figure out and partner with immigrant communities to engage people from, African countries, as well as the Caribbean and Latinx folks who identify as Black, and engage them in this process in a more deeper way. The LGBTQ community, we have several organizations specifically that are trans focused as well. Black men, Black people who are not typically engaged in politics. And then obviously anyone that's Black over 18, please fill it out. But those are the populations that we are trying to make sure that we are leaning into so that we can get more information related to those. Some challenges that we have faced, onboarding partners. We wanted to start in February, and we did, but it took us like 4 months to get a lot of the local grassroots partners really ready to start canvassing. So it wasn't until July and August that they really started moving and door knocking and talking to people in the community. And so the half of our time that we thought we would be able to be talking to people was cut. So we have leaned heavier on some of our national partners and a lot of our online engagement, phone and text baking even, to try to engage people that we weren't able to get at the beginning of the process. Reaching immigrant communities has still been a challenge. It's taking us a little bit longer, especially in some of the African countries, in order to get translations properly. We've had, back to the point about being Black, there's been a lot of divide in the Black community related to, are you an ancestor of enslaved people versus someone who came here after that period? And that tension is real. And so there's a nervousness in some immigrant communities about, well, I don't know if we fit Black. I don't know if we're accepted, or if you want to know about us. And so it's taken us a longer process to engage folks and make sure people understand that Black is inclusive, and all are welcome who identify with that diaspora in any way. But it has been a slower process than we expected. The length of the survey has been a challenge. We want to know all the information. People don't want to sit through a 15-minute survey. We've gotten it down to like 10 minutes, but we do realize that in the future, we may need to even cut it down even more, just in terms of a couple of things. One, when we're engaging people who aren't politically engaged, they get discouraged by not knowing some of the questions, not knowing information about some of the questions that we're asking. For instance, and I can share kind of the 3 major topics of the survey. We ask people about certain public officials that are at a national level to see if they know who they are. And when they go through the list and they don't know any of them, they're getting discouraged of like, oh, well, it's good information for us to know, but they don't know any of them, because one of our hypotheses is that building real political power has to start in states, and that Black people are not as focused as a community on what's happening in national politics, and more can be won at states and local levels. But it can be discouraging as they go through the survey and may not know all of those references. And then just in general skepticism about data collection in our community. So, oh no. So the last thing that I'll just say about the survey is that it's 3 parts. We ask people information about what they want for their community, right? What community problems do they think is most affecting Black people? We let them look at a group of community problems and tell us, but also to write in things that they'd want us to change about their city specifically. The second section is about politics and asking about, their voting history, what they know about people in power, what they think about people in power, what institutions do they trust, which ones do they not trust. And then finally, we ask demographic information. That's kind of the 3 major parts of the survey. So I will stop there to give people time to ask questions if you have any. And again, I'm grateful to be able to share with you. And if you identify as Black or you know anyone, blackcensus.org, I'll put it here.
Yes,
please fill it out.
That's the number 1 question that's coming in. We have lots and lots of questions. Kristin, thank you so much. You can see now for the people who haven't been constantly reading my email newsletters, bombarding you to share this information with everyone who it's useful for, how cool this project is and how really transformational this project is. There are many, many, many questions in the chat. Before I kind of read people's questions in the chat, let's see if there's somebody in the room. If you want to ask a question, now's the time to raise your hand. And we'll do our best to unmute you. And Matt, it's good to see you again. Go ahead.
So I thank you so much for sharing today, first of all. It's nice to hear. I work on other projects that are doing similar things around data or pulling data together. So I'll definitely be sharing your information with them as a way to augment it. But you mentioned that you're getting demographic data. Could you tell me a little bit about how disaggregated it is, and does it roll up into, for many folks who use the census data, and I won't do my diatribe today about how I'm not excited about the census data as something to use to center the work because of its many faults, but does it roll up into those categories? But does it also allow us to look deeper and see what's happening within community with the plethora of diversity that exists within the Black community?
Are you speaking of like income or how people identify themselves?
How people identify themselves. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, some of it is, some of the typical things that you ask related to income levels, employment, that kind of thing. We kind of break it down in a couple of ways. So we ask people if they identify themselves as Black or not, because you have to in order to take the survey. But then we ask, under the umbrella of Black, there's like 10 different ways that people could identify as a part of that community. And I don't have it on top of my head right now, but if you take it, you'll see those. So people, not just mixed race, but maybe they more identify as African-American or Afro-Caribbean or Afro-Latino. Like there's a variety of different ways that people might engage with the word Black.
And does that include country of origin if it's not the United States?
That's a good question. I have to go back and look if it does say the country of origin on there. I actually don't remember.
That's okay. I'll go take it and see what happens.
Thank you.
Thank you for making it.
See how excellent Kristin is at this. She'll be like, I'll answer part of your question. The rest, you will need to take the census. We will do a little. I just loved that response. Okay, so again, I'm just going to try and collect the questions from the chat that are being asked by a lot of people. I think this one echoes a lot. Thank you for sharing your journey and work. Lots of exclamation points. I'm curious to go a little bit more deep into the policy recommendations that Black people are united on. I would love to hear more about the processes your team's using to ascertain what counts, like how you're counting united on in the data, since the communities are so nuanced. Your example at the end about lineages and origins is very familiar to me, working with immigrants from Spanish-speaking countries. So how do you take the data and try and make meaning from it, I think is one of the questions a lot of people are asking.
Yeah, and we are still work in progress. This is only our second time doing this, and we're only 4 years old. So a little bit of this is getting better, I hope, with time. And I will say the first time that we did this survey, I was not on staff, still in Florida, organizing. So some of this is me regurgitating what I understand from other folks that were on the team at that time. So for us, we pulled out trends based on the data as a whole, but then we started to pull out demographically what were trends that we were seeing specifically from Black men versus trends we were seeing from people that identified as LGBTQ versus trends, right, as opposed to just Black people as a whole trends, because once you started to pull that out, you did see some more differences than just looking at trends from the survey responses as a whole. And actually on Black to the Future Action Fund's website, so our C4, you will see that there's a few reports that actually outline what we got from some of those differences as opposed to just the Black Agenda report. So that's one thing that we really tried to do because we wanted to make sure we understood, especially in the community, that queer folks, Black men, and the population as a whole was different. Okay, here we are. One hello. Okay, say hi.
Hi.
All right.
So happy to see you.
We're happy to see you. Okay, you go back. We go back. Bye-bye. So thanks for waving. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is the partners. So we really wanted to be clear on going back to the partners, the original 28, and this year more than 100, and looking at here's the trends that we found, and wanting to actually make sure, is this really what you're hearing on the ground? What's happening on the ground? What are the differences between the trends that we're seeing and what's happening on the ground? Luckily, the first time we were seeing some similar trends, but that also helped us figure out what policies we should be really looking at. Because, for example, there was overwhelming people wanted to talk about criminal justice reform. However, what people think about what reform looks like in the Black community is very different, although the media portrays that we're all on the same page, we are not. And so using our partner relationships to be able to go back and say, okay, we're seeing these trends of what people care about. Some people are really anti-police, some people want police. You know, even in Jacksonville, most communities I went to, they really did want police. They wanted them to treat them like the white communities got treated, right? Service instead of attack. And so those were some of the things that we had to kind of dig into, because as we found with the data, especially because we can't have the survey be 100 questions, we needed to go back to the partners and kind of dig into, okay, what are the nuances of what we should really be presenting in terms of policy recommendations. And then the last thing I will say is we kind of went on a little bit of a roadshow the first time and did focus groups after we collected the data and came to some conclusions to kind of see if they made sense to people. And so we did that extra step last time. We intend to do it again this time in 2023, just to kind of make sure that the nuances of what we're finding that the nuances are included in our findings and not just kind of the broad. I don't know if that answers the question.
That's a fabulous answer. Amazing. Yes, people are so excited. I'm going to follow up because there's with what you said about the criminal justice reform and the idea that it came up, it sounds like consistently in the previous round. And then of course there's not one idea of what that reform looks like. You mentioned when you were talking that one of the key groups of people you were really hoping to include in this Black community census is people who are either currently incarcerated or have been incarcerated. So there's a bunch of questions about this in the chat. One of them is, do you know anything, and you might not, because this is probably outside of your scope, anything about how many of those people are included in like the formal American census? And then two, do you have any tips on how to help other people who are trying to also have these voices represented? Are you having success in making that be transformational, not transactional?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about the census, the US Census. I will say as we're talking to folks, people by and large are saying this is the first time anyone's ever talked to me. And so that would tell me that, you know, they're not going to be able, people that are incarcerated, they're not getting online to take the census. So if someone didn't come into the prison to speak with them, they weren't spoken to. But that's obviously anecdotal. In terms of the transactional versus transformational, I mean, I think to that same point, when no one's ever spoken or asked their opinion, right? They're just excited to be engaged in that process. This hasn't been vetted. I'm just saying it out loud. So first here, I would really love our roadshow to include a few stops actually in the same prisons and jails that we were able to canvass in. Last time our roadshow was mostly in conjunction with partners, Black-led partners in some of the states that we got the most engagement from, but we didn't go back to any of the facilities that we had canvassed in, and we didn't canvass that many the first time. We're doing a lot more now. So I would love to engage that population in that way after the fact, because that would be another step of making this not just transactional, like you gave us information, here's what came of it, what do you think, what are your ideas? Because they do have a lot. And then also a third thing I just want to keep in mind is that in the jails specifically, many people that are in jail are there awaiting a trial, which means they haven't been convicted, which means they actually are still eligible to vote. And so we are also working to partner with organizations in engaging that population and pushing back against, you know, public officials who are trying to use the ignorance of folks not knowing that you can still vote if you're incarcerated, if you haven't been convicted in most states, to engage with that population, that you can tell us all this information and you can actually vote too and do something about some of the things that you just mentioned. So that's an ongoing process.
Yeah, that is so powerful. Thank you for sharing that. Matz knows a lot about the census. And she said, or sorry, I don't know the pronoun. They say prisons count the incarcerated as, quote, residents in their districts and get the benefits for this, quote, diversity, which sounds
Yeah, that's kind of helpful.
That seems right.
Yeah, that's a huge crack in the system because, you know, at least in most states that I've worked in, they're in the middle of nowhere, which are predominantly white communities.
Right.
So there's not this huge influx of Black people in, you know, middle of nowhere, Ohio. They should be counted in the city that they came from.
Yeah.
But
so that is amazing that you'll have that data and we'll be able to make some corrections. Thank you again. So one of the questions that is just flooding the chat is, there are people on this call who have connections to national and local organizations. How can those people help get the word out, how to leverage those existing connections to promote the survey? Obviously, you've shared the link. Are there other things that people can do to help get the response rate as high as possible in those next couple months?
Yeah, so if you have any folks from organizations, they're welcome to email me directly, Kristin at blackfutureslab.org. Right now, we encourage people to become what we call broadcasting partners. And broadcasting partners really just are agreeing to share on social media. We'll give them a toolkit and to send to their email lists and do other things of that nature in order to get the word out. I think on our website, on the Black Futures Lab website, our list of current partners, going outside? Okay, bye-bye. Our current partners are listed on the Black Futures Lab website, but our national partners aren't there yet. I think we're still working on getting them uploaded. And so that's been, so you can check there to see if any groups, but if you want to just ask, feel free to email me and I can tell you if they're already plugged in. And if not, I'd love to talk to them.
Great. All right. Well, I know that you'll be getting a lot of emails. So thank you. And yeah, I'm sure I know people that's just flooding the comments. What about access to the data, or two interesting questions. So a couple of people asked, do other organizations have access to the data or the results so that they can make sure that they embed the agenda that your team is setting up in their strategic plannings in the next couple of years? A lot of people asked that. One person asked a really interesting question, which I loved, which is, again, I can't attach to their name because they've asked it to be anonymous through direct message. But since this is trying to be transformational and not transactional and is kind of generating very valuable information from a much neglected community of people, is there some possibility that people who are organizations that are not Black-led or Black-centered organizations would have to pay to access the insights? That's an interesting question. So what happens to the data once you have it, if anything, after, or is it mostly for internal use?
Yeah, so all of our partners sign an actual MOU with us and will get access, unlimited access to the raw data, the anonymous raw data indefinitely. And even though they might only organize in Georgia, they would have all the information for people that answered the survey across the country. And again, that's just the anonymous survey collection, not people that opted in to share their information. That only goes to us and the organization that might have collected that. So that's one thing that's really important to us, that the Black-led organizations that were on the ground are using their platform to get the word out, have access to that data set. And then we also have what I just mentioned, broadcasting partners that may not be doing a lot of the on-the-ground work to getting people to fill it out, but we'll get first look at the summary of the data and what our findings are. And we'll be doing different conferences and meetings about that throughout 2023 in our roadshow, and including those partners or people in that. And then the third way that we're sharing data is we are open to data usage agreements. We've already been contacted by a few universities interested in what we've collected, but they would have to pay. And we are working right now with our data team on what we're comfortable with. We did do that last time with a couple of places. universities, and so I would say that likely universities or white-led organizations would be in that same boat, that it would be on a case-by-case basis, and we just kind of would have to make sure that we believe in the values of the organization, what they want to do with that data, and then have a kind of ironclad data uses agreement related to that before we would give them access.
Fabulous. We have a couple of people in the chat saying charge a lot of money because your data is extraordinarily valuable. So you have a lot of support here. I want to pause. There's still lots more in the chat, but I want to see again. We have about probably time for 2 more questions. If there's anybody in the room who would like to raise their hand. There's a lot of you today, so I can't see all of you, but if you raise your hand, I think you come to the top of my participant list. So if you want to ask a question and unmute yourself, this is your opportunity. I'll give you that opportunity. Oh, okay, yes. Go ahead.
I'm Angela. I love the work that you're doing, and I'll do what I can to support it in my space. I asked the question online, which was, I was curious if there was a way to verify that survey takers aren't going to sabotage the data. I always worry about that with online surveys. And so I'm just wondering how you deal with that, if there's like a margin of error you introduce or something like that.
Yeah, we're worried about it too. We do have a data team. We're using an outside data vendor that's helping us do that quality control work. And I'm not a data expert, so I can't really tell you the details of how they figure that out. But you know, what we've actually had a harder time with is people worried that we're not Black, and that this is all what we're finding, especially in Black men, is that they are very much, in some instances, buying into the fake news that's coming from the conservative movement. And so even verifying our legitimacy has been a little bit of a challenge in some communities, despite having Alicia Garza as our principal, and being an all Black staff. But yeah, the data people know how they're verifying it. I don't know the details of how they're trying to do that margin of error.
Well, good. I'm glad you're at least looking at it. But that reverse situation you just mentioned is that would limit your participation quite a bit. I can see where that would be a problem.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very interesting issue because it is an issue that has been created by white supremacy, right? Like by a long history of lying to Black people about how, why, and who is collecting their data and what's going to happen with it. And so it really is an artifact that is unfortunately now having an effect when your team is trying to reverse the effects.
Right.
So yeah, that's just the layers of impact that racism has are devastating.
Yeah, and while you're doing, just to answer a question I see, we are working to survey people who are experiencing homelessness. Mostly it's coming from some of our partners who work in the mental health field that are actually working in community mental health facilities or homeless shelters that provide mental health resources that are helping us. But it is not as robust as our work with incarcerated folks. And so I hope next time we can have even bigger focus on that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, really what you're trying to do is it can't be overstated in how much work it is, how much money it costs, how much time it takes, how much resources, how much relationship building. One of the things that really stands out for me is your focus on being transformational rather than transactional. And that's the exact opposite of the way that big tech, for example, views data collection and the vast majority of data collection. And that is specifically one of the things that data equity tools are trying to even raise as a conceptual possibility, that, you know, data collection doesn't have to be transactional, extractive, and appropriative. It can actually be transformational. So I am just so thankful. We are getting close to the end of our time, and I really want to thank you so much, Kristin. We can all see that you are not only being willing to be here with us today, but also are parenting at the same time. We're so grateful that you were willing to do that. And I have no doubt that already in your inbox are many requests for people wanting to reach out and support, and people wanting to find out how they can share the various resources. And the other thing that we are already getting requests for, and again, I'm on 2 computers, so let's see if I can do this correctly, is the recording, because lots of people were not able to be here today for the whole time. Some people had to come and go, and then lots of people's teams from around the world couldn't be here. So we will post a recording for internal use at the We All Count Data Equity Community Forum. That is a data equity community forum. It's much like Talking Data Equity. It does not cost money to join. It's not a membership site. We don't harvest your data. We don't serve you ads. You can look at the recordings, just put in the search bar that community Talking Data Equity, and you'll see this recording and a whole bunch of other recordings on similar related topics that have resources, and you can ask questions. If you want to ask a question or post a resource or download one of the resources that are posted, you do have to make an account, but all an account is your email and a password, and your email is only used to send you a password like refresh link if you forget your password. Your email is not used for any other reason at all. So we're gonna have to leave it there. I know that's a rough place, but I hope that everybody, really anybody who thinks that you know, they don't have a choice or that it can't be done, really spends time looking at the Black Census Project, looking at Black Future Labs, and realizing that hard things can be done, and that it's really worth it. Kristin, I cannot overemphasize how grateful we are that you came and shared your personal and your professional experience, and how nice it was on a Friday. Because if you're in Canada like me, you're actually going to Thanksgiving weekend. It's a long weekend. And I know that this will really be the thing that I am thinking about and working on doing better at supporting over the weekend. So thank you for coming. Thank you for everyone else for coming. I know this was a hugely popular Talking Data Equity, so feel free to share the link with your friends. It'll take us a couple hours to get it up on the forum, but feel free to share the link with your friends, and have a really good rest of your Friday. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.